My guest tonight is the developer behind a fan game so good you'd think the license was official. It combines one of the most beloved Super Nintendo fighting games with the best fighting game Blizzard could come up with. You can download it now to play it for free, and there's an amazing documentary by Phil Nolan on the Hold Back to Block YouTube channel. Here is a quick look.
This game was called a ROM hack so many times that at first I was bothered by it, but then I took it as like a badge of honor because they're like, there's no way this thing's on M.U.G.E.N. There's no way. It feels too good. There's no character in this game that feels like another character in this game. I made a few changes with World, which he's entirely different. The only move that he has is the same, is his projectile and his shoulder charge. Everything else was completely made up. He was not a grappler. Cheetah kind of feels like this Felicia-like character because that's my way of saying, Darkstalker fans, I see you. This game rewards you in a lot of ways for finding a way you want to play it and basically respecting it with your time. I made sure that there was defensive rewards and offensive rewards in every facet of the work.
Please welcome to the show the man behind TMNT Cross Justice League Turbo, Kamekaze. How you doing, man?
Hello. I am doing pretty good this fine evening.
Beautiful. And enjoying the late night, a good cup of tea, relaxing wind down.
Oh yeah.
So, I know I'm sure you've played plenty of both the games that your game here is inspired by. Number one question, should Blizzard try to make another fighting game?
I think that Blizzard is a very interesting company that's made a lot of interesting decisions. And I think it's for the best interest of everyone that they stay in the lane that works best for them. And leave the fighting game to the fighting game companies.
Not a better diplomatic answer has ever been given. Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this game, because I'll say it was your whoever was running your social for the game had followed me, and I was like, this seems interesting. I checked it out, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I grew up with the Super Nintendo. I played plenty of Street Fighter, but I am in no ways a fighting game guy. I wouldn't know a combo breaker from my ass from my elbow. But I was able to jump into this game and have a ton of fun with it. What is like your secret sauce here for making a game like this with a pre-existing style and making it how we remember fighting games for that era being, not necessarily how fighting games for that era were, if that makes sense?
So going into it, the primary thing that I wanted to target was TMNT Tournament Fighters players, because this was more or less a gift to that community, because I was like, until recently, like TMNT has kind of had a renaissance of sorts, and I love to see it, because literally when I first started the game, a few months later, they were announced for Injustice 2, and I was kind of worried, but fortunately they didn't bother me. But I was like, this community has not gotten really a lot of anything in the department of competitive games. There's been your standard beat 'em ups for the GBA. There's been some mobile stuff. There's been even some weird plug and plays with some actually decent sprite work. Like, some of them are pretty good. Shout out to Dino, please, for streaming that. But I decided that I wanted to take something and make it feel the way that I felt like it should. And the idea was something that I and the person running the socials for the game just kind of spitball. Like, the first thing we thought about was Omega Shredder. And that was how we bridged the gap between DC and TMNT, because we were like, okay, here's Omega Shredder. His whole deal is Shredder's always like souped up as a bad guy in every game. And he has some weird MacGuffin for a reason why. I said, well, in this case, Darkseid just decides to revive him because lore-wise, he's dead at this point, because Cyber Shredder is actually an android in that Tournament Fighters game. And I was like, well, now he's back. And that's why he looks as disheveled and rusty and ugly and dead as he is. And he's kind of like the first bridge of the game. And of course, there's more spoilers in story mode that explains why there is a fifth turtle and all of that. And if you shout out to Turtlepedia as well, if you're familiar with that, you'll know why that happened as well. But ultimately, the sauce was I wanted to connect Tournament Fighters players to a new game, and I wanted to make it simple enough for people to just jump in, and even if they've never really played fighting games before, I wanted to make sure there was enough for them to do. And that's why there's so much single player content, so much things to find by accident. There are like so many hidden bosses, and I keep adding them and not telling anybody. And like when you find them, like I wanted to harken back to the days where like you had your notes and you're telling your friends at the playground, like, oh yeah, well I found this character that doesn't even belong in this game, and they're like, no way, you're lying. But you know, people used to do that. So I like the idea of creating a mythos behind this game, and ultimately making it where by the time you've got done with all the single player modes, hey, you're a fighting game player now. You know how to play the game. Go ahead and go and play people. So it's like before you know it, like kind of like I like what Street Fighter 6 did, especially. That was the same idea I had in mind of just like slowly introducing concepts to them. So that way, by the time they're done with everything, they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm okay with fighting games. And then I was like, I want the old and the new. I don't want the old people to be left out, myself included. We are old. I'm sorry. But I also wanted to say, hey, new folks, here's the thing you can do. So just stuff like that. I mean, this is like my 5th game that I've actually made. And it's kind of crazy that this is the one that blew up, to be honest.
I mean, it blew up because you did a great job making it feels cohesive. And I think, you know, you have a great quote in the documentary where you basically put M.U.G.E.N on blast. And it's one of those things where I've seen a lot of these M.U.G.E.N games and it's like nothing feels like it belongs together. There's like flashy 32-bit fire effects with a 16-bit sprite character and a hand-drawn character all going at it. Like, yeah, that can be fun. I get it. But like, there's something to a cohesive feeling across all assets, the music, the character work, the way that everyone's fights feel and move. Like, I think there's a lot to that. And I think that's that goes kind of a long way here. You mentioned that this was a love letter to sort of the Turtles fan base. Was the idea to bring in DC always part of it, or was that kind of like you want to pad out with something else fun, sort of after the fact?
Yeah. So because of the fact that we had Omega Shredder, and like here's the thing. So Zool, which is a person who's also behind the Ultra Clay Fighter hack, shout out to him. He had put out a combo video about Task Force, and that was like my 2nd time seeing it, and my 1st time seeing it with any sort of competency behind it. And I was like, so at first I was like, this game sure does exist. It's one of the games I've ever seen. And when I saw what you could do with it, I was like, that's pretty cool. So what I did first was I gathered all the assets from the game using ZSNES because, of course, I did. And yeah, I first made the characters available for M.U.G.E.N because my whole deal is that I've made the most characters than anyone on this planet. I don't really know why I did that anymore, but the current number is around 165, somewhere in that area.
Holy shit!
Wow.
Yes.
And the main thing was that I was like quality and quantity instead of quality over quantity. But I made them for General M.U.G.E.N first, and it has 3 separate styles. It has the original gameplay, which even in the README is like, don't actually play this. I mean, if you want to, you could. Then there's like a mixture between old and new, and then there's finally one where there's like traditional supers involved. So that was setting up the idea of how the supers were going to eventually be in this crossover game. And a lot of the supers are the same, even. Just a little bit of tweaks here and there. So that was me setting up the idea of it. And I put out a teaser video that just had all of the DC characters, before I even made the game, doing the super showcase of original DC character games from Task Force. And there was a bit where, like, right in the end, there was a little sliver of the title of what I was doing next. To this day, no one picked it up. So, just to say, here's what I'm about to do. So, to set the scene, this was 2017, all the way back in September. And
wow.
We got this channel in the Discord. I was invited to the TMNT Discord. He gave us a channel, and the rest was history. And the first 2 characters was Leonardo and Batman. You can see those videos right now on my channel to see what the game used to look like before somebody saved me with good art. Because before that, it was all my work. And I sure do know what colors are. That's about as good as art as I am.
Just, yeah. It's a start. It's a pure 1st grade knowledge. You can begin with that. It's wonderful. That's let's talk about the art here, because you both in game and out, you have been able to bring on some amazing artists as part of this project. Talk a little bit about that. Are there like a couple of legendary names who've worked in the industry. What were some of the big ones that like popped you? That like you found out they were interested and willing to help out, and that just like blew you away.
So the credits for that goes to our graphic lead, known by AyWhatsGoingOn. He is always full of surprises. It's the best way I can describe how he does things. To this day, I have no idea how he was able to get in contact with any of these people, how he was able to get them involved with a fan project like this, how he sold it to them for them to not leave them on red. And the first big one that happened was Nona of SNK fame, whose most famous artwork can be seen in KOF 2000, 2001, and of course SVC Chaos. That guy. So he surprised me in December of 2018 with artwork, and like the very first artwork of the game, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? How?" And because of that, all of a sudden we had this thing that the kids call clout. And when other famous former artists, musicians saw that, oh, I remember Nona, I used to work with him. Well, now I want in. Oh, I remember Tate Norio. Well, I want in too. So it's like at a certain point, it kind of started to become a pissing contest of old SNK and former other developers and artists and musicians who were like, well, I gotta get on this. Like I haven't worked with them in forever. So it just kind of became a waterfall moment where one person dipped their toe in and it said, water's fine, everybody. And then it just happened. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, this is for like a silly little fan game though. This is just a little thing that I threw together. What's happening? Why? What are you doing here? Why are you here? Thank you so much, but I'm very confused. And that was pretty much my entire thought process every time I received more quality art and music, what have you. Even the sound effects that were given to us was made by the same person who also made the No Stage remix that is on one of the stages in the game. He started off by giving us the sound effects that you hear when characters do supers. That's him. And he also made that song. I believe he made a couple other songs too. But hearing Asuka's remix like that, well, for starters, people was like, well, where is she? Because she's not even in the game. And I was like, well, you see, I couldn't make her work at first because she just didn't have enough to work with. And of course, there's the April question, because people just think, oh, you just plastered April on Asuka. That was deliberate, yes. And it wasn't my idea. It was actually Konami's, because if you look at Asuka and April's sprites, they are very similar to each other. And a friend of mine who was going to make her sprites first gave me a comparison of their stances and just put April's clothes on Asuka, and it just looked like April. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And there's a GIF image that I give the people anytime they ask about it. And I was like, what happened to Asuka? Why is April here? And I would just show them that image, and they was like, oh, okay. But then at the end of the day, Asuka is like not really a TMNT character. So I was like, she doesn't really need to be here because she's kind of like a Konami OC, which, of course, the artist who made that character is part of the reason why she's in the game now. Because he was like, hey, put my girl back in.
Wow.
He also was responsible for Karai. So that was kind of like a parlay to say, well, if you want Karai, I'm gonna need you to put Asuka back. And I was like, okay, fine.
Put in my brainchild. Let me have my girl back in this. That's wild.
Yeah, then we get a whole other conversation about Martial Masters, because that was also his game, which Konami kind of butchered. There's a whole video where we talk about it on my channel, where I interview the guy with his translator, and he tells us all about Martial Masters and what happened and why it wasn't the game that people thought it could have been. Either way, like I said, the fact that I know these people now, the fact that I talk to them, the fact that they know me, I don't really have an explanation. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if people thought I was lying, I would completely understand. But I got the chat log, so
the paper trail's there. That's it's so funny because I truly for the longest time thought that Asuka was just a bad translation of April O'Neil. That something got messed up between us and Japan, and that they just messed that up. That was meant to be April for the longest time.
Well, the thing is, like, people have this prevailing theory that at one point in time she was meant to be a tie-in to the third TMNT movie, and there is some truth to that, but not like
Really?
entirely. Like there was the fact that at one point in time her name was Mitsu, which was more related to the character in TMNT 3, which is the third movie in the franchise. It's the best thing I can use to describe it.
It's a
But
movie
if
that
that ever was
exists.
the case, Konami quickly, and I mean quickly, according to the guy who told us himself, changed their mind on that and just brought him in and said, okay, we need to make her a different character. We need you to draw these sprites up. We need you to make it happen. So that's pretty much Asuka's whole history.
I definitely saw that movie in theaters as a kid, and I definitely don't remember a single aspect of it. Nothing has
I
stuck with
wish.
me.
What is that like? I wish I could do that way, but man, it's just there's so many scenes that live in my head rent free.
Liquor and a lot of pot helps. You've
Yeah.
made so go back to something you said you've made in your storied career here. You said over 160 characters, right? For in
Yes, I've
general
been
fighting
around
games.
for
That's
it's
what
been 17 years. So
wow. So what is the secret to making them play and feel differently? I will say, like, as someone, again, I don't necessarily have the language to describe it, but I know when I'm picking up this game that like Rat King and Flash and Kirby all play differently. So, like, what is a secret when you have, especially with a game like this, when you have, even just with this base roster, how do you find that way to make each character feel unique? What goes into that process?
So when I came into approaching every character, for the most part, all the Task Force characters, I just kind of, if their move sets weren't interesting, I just kind of made my own base with the sprites available. Because Despero, spoilers, is not a grappler in that game. He is a Batman knockoff. That is what he is. So him and Batman almost have the
Wow.
exact same move set. But you would not know that if you played my game first. You feel cheated if you went to Task Force. Well,
That
so
feels like a wild choice for the way Despero looks. Like there are other DC
mhm,
characters you could have pulled and done that the Ryu-Ken with on
mhm.
Batman there instead.
Yeah, they love the idea of a slow, leaping dive kick attack because Batman and him both have it. But for whatever reason, his regular throws just look like a command grab. So I was like, well, why not make it one? He gets a big backbreaker. That's cool as hell. So I was like, okay, I know the archetypes I want to cover. I know that I want, like, when I look at a character, I'm like, here's what I envision for them. So with the TMNT cast, I tried to not change a whole lot, but I did try to make some balanced decisions that made sense. Like, for example, Wars, like now he's a menace. Most people consider him a menace instead of a menace to society. He's just flat out a menace, because he's very scary. A lot of his changes just make sense, and he's really cool. Rat King was a character who was famously like had very little to work with. So I had another friend of mine come up and help me with a lot of new frames. And also, we kind of shared a couple with the TMNT Championship Edition hack that's going on. Some of the stuff they had going on, we shared assets with them too. So they got their own thing too that I'm gonna shill in a second. But
Yeah.
so because of that, it led me to have a lot of animations for Rat King that made him feel better. I was like, I don't want him to just be a grappler. I was like, I want him to feel like Alex with more emphasis on brawling, and that's why you see he has a couple Alex
Okay.
ideas in him, especially a stand hard kick is kind of a dead giveaway. So that kind of thing, I was like, I want him to just hit really hard. And at one point in time, his drop kick was almost the same way that Raiden's was, but I didn't like it, so I just kind of made it a command. But stuff like that I was like, okay, I know what I want to change. Here's how I'm gonna do it. With Karai, because of the fact that she was initially gonna stay a boss, I just kind of went balls to the walls on her. So now it's just kind of been a journey of trying to figure out how to make her fair. Because even though she's been rebalanced twice now, she's still kind of not that fair. Even if her health is Shinakuma tier. So I just kind of was like, okay, well, I want to flesh out what they have. Because Asuka, like I said, she didn't have much to work with, but we got new frames for her. And now she's a lot more of a ninja, an aspect, like a lot more ninja things she does. It's really neat. So the TMNT side was a lot easier because I didn't have to work as hard, but I did have to get, like, I wanted to make their moves feel different and come up with ideas of what the basic combos look like, but I didn't want to repeat myself because you have Leonardo's basic kit and you have Raphael's basic kit, and they almost look identical until you realize how they're ending. and like what the resources are. So like stuff like that. Like and with the DC side, I was just like, okay, well, Superman, he's all right, he can stay. Aquaman, we're gonna make some changes. Flash, we're gonna make a little bit of changes. Like just stuff so I can be like, well, who's not represented on TMNT side? And with Zoom, which he was one of the first characters I pitched for the sequel in the first place. I was like, Flash is considered the best in the game. How do I make a character that just completely pisses off that character? And that's when I came up with Zoom. So everything that Flash does, Zoom just kind of gets around it. And even though Zoom's not the best character by any stretch, he is absolutely a horrible matchup for Flash. So like that's my mission accomplished, if you will. So a lot of it just kind of came down to the fact that I've played several fighting games in my life. I've studied them. I broke them down to the point where I've decompiled some just to understand how they tick and why the decisions were made that way. Like a friend of mine and I coming up with the input interpreter for the fact that it just matches CPS2 hardware, like the down to the hardware exact bit definition. All of that's there. Like that was something that was important to me, and that's why the game feels as good as it does. Because like I said, it's just Capcom's. Jesus Zilla is the mastermind behind that. He's also the reason why we saw Sagat's crouching hard punch in CVS2 for the first time with the hitboxes. Like for years, people speculated that it was just a monster, but it really wasn't that bad. Like so, I like digging in and seeing how things are because it doesn't look as scary when you kind of just look behind the curtain. And that's why I wanted to have all these tools there for people in training mode too. Like I'm not afraid of my hitboxes. Look at them, see what you can do. Right. I'm not afraid of the advantage. Look at it, see what you can do, like stuff like that. So, because I've made so many characters, it taught me what I need to do and what I don't need to do. Like best practices and what I actually can get away with versus what I think is cool, but actually everyone else hates. So stuff like that.
When you're not like embroiled in this, what are the games, especially the fighting games? What are the fighting games that you're playing? Playing a lot of any new stuff? Or are you still sticking with the kind of the older era arcade 16-bit kind of things?
I wish I had more time to play fighting games, but the thing
is, more time to play any games.
I'm not working. Like shout out to the Steam Deck. It's the only way I play anything outside of my office because this is where my computer is. It's downstairs. Yep. So, I did get to play Street Fighter 6 for a little bit. I did get to play Type Lumina for a little bit. I used to be really big in the Under Night. I love that game. Waldstein is my guy. Chaos is my other guy. So, I mean, I kind of dipped my toe around. You know, I messed with Street Fighter 5 just enough for me to look at it and understand that mistakes were made. And I used to be really big into Street Fighter 4, obviously. But my favorite game, without question, is Street Fighter Alpha 2. And some of the decisions that I made, that becomes more apparent as well. My second favorite game being the EX series. All of them. I love Street Fighter EX. The music, the gameplay, Volcano Rosso, all of that. So a lot of my favorite things in fighting games were just what I picked to say, here's what I want. Because Clayface in general, for those who are keen on Street Fighter EX2, the fact that he feels very Volcano Rosso adjacent is very much on purpose. Because he is a love letter to my favorite character from that series. So
what a get. Holy shit.
Yeah. But lately, like I said, I don't really get to play as much fighting games as I used to, and I'm hoping that change because I'm told, as a parent, that at a certain point, your child gets tired of you, and then they want to just do something else, and then they leave you alone. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm told by other parents that that's a thing. When that does, I'll probably get to play more fighting games. So, probably. Like, that's kind of the thing. But, I would like to play more games, but I'm too busy making them. And I can't even say that, after this I'll play more games because I have 3 more games in the works, one of which I can't talk about right now. But 2 of which I kind of semi-announced already. So that I just stay busy for some reason. It's a problem, really.
It's a drive. Let's talk about you. So what can you say about the ones you can say something about?
So right before the first version of TMNT Cross Justice League came out, there was a game called Shades of Manhattan 3 that this guy named Sean Altley created the characters for and made the sprite work for. And it's the 3rd iteration of that series. And it was the first one that I was 100% involved with as a battle coordinator. So the combat feels very much up to my standards, and it's very fun to play. Whereas the first two were just more story driven and just doing the best he could with the information he had, because he first and foremost was an artist. So it's kind of rough on the edges. But I kind of made the AI for him in some of those games, and I was supposed to do more, but life got away from me and it just didn't happen. And I said, tell you what, I owe you. So when Shades of Manhattan 3 came around, he was like, hey, you owe me. And I was like, I do. And I was like, tell you what though. I was like, I was actually going to remaster your second game, so I'll just take the gameplay system that I made up for that one and put it on this one. And so that game's getting remastered for the same engine that Cross Justice League Turbo is on. And it's adding a couple new characters. There's going to be more new characters coming because the artist is making, like, drawing new ones as we speak, characters that were on the cutting room floor. So that's coming around, and that one's going to ship with rollback. So I'm very happy about that one.
Great.
The best way I can describe it is it's Marvel adjacent. Like, there are chain combos, but the launchers aren't guaranteed to you. They kind of work around, well, you know what? If you join the Discord, which I'll give you the link to, I have a whole channel with all the tech there. There's a lot of tech. There's so much tech that I came up with.
We've thrown out a lot of things. Tech. There'll be a laundry list of links in the description below for this video. Absolutely.
And the other one, I don't know if there are any classic PC gamers in the chat, but there's a little game called One Must Fall 2097. It came out in the early 90s. It is a phenomenal game for its time, and it kind of still holds up today. It did a lot of unique things where you could customize your robot, do the colors, add a tournament mode where you can have all these randomized tournament matches. That game is getting remade, and I am spearheading it. And
wow.
It's already, like, it's in its rough alpha stages, but I'm going to make sure that every single thing that was present of that game is carried over, and it will also come with rollback. So that's also in the works. The reason I'm doing that is because there's another piece of game called Songo Fighter, and the person who owns the rights to that also owns the rights to this. So it's technically contract work. So he was like, well, you did a great job with this game. I do have the license for this. And I was like, I would love to take a stab at that. I've always wanted to. And I got a friend of mine who knows everything about that game because he's decompiled it. And he's working with me on that. So we've been working together for that. So I'm doing a lot of cool stuff that, again, makes absolutely no sense. But I just am.
But it sounds like you're not dodging cease and desists with these other projects or having to worry about that.
Well, the good news about those is, well, since the creators are working with me, easier said than done.
Right.
And it's crazy that you mentioned that, even though that TMNT Cross Justice League Turbo almost feels like a licensed title. And that's because I did a stream on this a few months ago, because it almost was. And things kind of fell through. And I went in full detail about what that's about there. But at one point in time, both Paramount and WB were interested in this thing. And just, stuff happens. Stuff falls apart. It is what it is. But
naturally,
we were very close to being real and avoiding the pitfall of fan games that get C&D. But the good news is they acknowledge it and they don't care, because they're like, well, you're not monetizing it. We're not monetizing it. Let's just pretend we never met. And that's just kind of
you're not taking money off their table, which is all obviously the bottom line for any project like this. If you're not costing them anything and you're not painting anything, it's not like you're watching turtles get decapitated. You're not painting anything in a light that they might feel inappropriate for the IP, and therefore, why the fuck should they care?
Yeah, and you know what? I made very sure that if it were going to be a thing, that it would get a rating no higher than teen. Like, there were times where before an editor got involved, some of the ideas the editor pitched involved things that I was like, that's a little more PG than I want. Like, at the end of the day, yes, TMNT started off as very much a parody and brutal comic book. But at the end of the day, you got to understand who's the massive market share. Like, I don't want to go too far off the edge. So I was like,
that's not the franchise.
and if we do, it has to be turtle puns. So that's why you would hear Michelangelo say, "Get the shell out of here." Like, stuff like that, where fans are like, okay, yeah. So nothing more crazier than that is pretty much the standard that I imposed on the editor.
Great. my last question for you here is that like you've talked a little bit what you're working on next with the success and how like well received this game has been and the amount of amazing talent you guys have been able to bring on for it. Have you ever thought of dipping your toes into doing your own IP as a fighting game? You've got the mechanics down. Like,
oh boy, how much time do you have? Yeah,
as much as you got.
I have several original gameplay in like ideas that I have for things that I like. I even have I literally have lore. I have characters. I have everything involved, but I can't draw, and I do not know how to explain this to people who can, and I do not have the money to make that happen. And that's not really like I'm not in the point where I'm like, oh, I'll Kickstarter it. It's not really. I know I'm staying in my lane for right now. Like I know my limits. I understand. There's a lot of amazing indie fighting games coming out right now by a lot of people who took a lot of risks, and I have the utmost respect to them because I'm not there yet. So, would I like to? Sure. Like I have gameplay systems that like there was a game that I was gonna make that was very near and dear to my heart. That was a crossover of crossovers, to say the least. I decided that it's not gonna see the light of day, but it was like gonna be my anime style game where the combat is more arc system works kind of deal.
Yeah,
with a mixture
yeah.
of other fun ideas that I had. So the gameplay system is just sitting there, and I've thought about like there's spriters that I talk to who are like, man, I would like to make a fighting game, and I'm like, well, if you do, let me know because I have systems that I'm just sitting on that I can we can work together on this. Like there's this spriter that's a friend of mine named Motoroach who did some sprite work for TMNT Shredder's Revenge, and he's also the select art portrait artist of my game. So if you like those cool looking characters on the select screen, it was drawn by him. He also drew Casey's sprites. He also drew Clayface's sprites. And the fact that Casey is so on model that you wouldn't even know he wasn't in the original game is how good he is.
Everyone you've made up for this has absolutely like it fits in. That's what's so crazy about this. Mm-hmm. Clayface looks like it belongs in this game. He's not in any of these games. But yeah.
This is his first fighting game. It's crazy, right? I don't understand how it took so long. Like, God, you could do literally anything you want with him, and that's kind of what I did. I was like, I'm going to make him make a sword out of his foot. Let's just go crazy. Let's reference Battletoads or for boot. Let's just do whatever we want.
Yes, exactly. Missed opportunity that you knew to capitalize on. You knew to jump in on that. That's what it is.
And people don't really, well, unless you're in our Discord, people don't really know that Clayface was a choice that he was not the original idea for the next DC character that was going to be added. We flirted with quite a few of them because I wanted to reference characters that have never been in any gaming media before. One of them was almost going to be Darkseid's son, Craven. Pretty sure I just butchered his name, but it was almost him. And his gameplay was going to be a little bit similar, but like stuff like that I wanted to do. But to get back around, yeah, Motoroach wants to make a Sonic fighting game. He has flirted with the idea of it. And I've told him time and time again, when you are ready, we can make this happen. Like he's wanted to do a Sega crossover in general, and he's so good. But you know, he's in the industry now, so of course he doesn't really have the time. Like the dude's made. Right. He's a AAA graphic artist, and I'm so proud of him because I've seen him come up from his beginnings up until now over the last decade or so. So it's like there's so many people who I've seen elevated. Not just because of this game, because I'm not gonna try to have an ego and say, "Oh yeah, you know, because of me." No, I don't really know how he got involved with Shredder's Revenge.
But not because of this game, right? Like let's you take your flowers. Take your flowers.
It's possible. Because like a lot of people, when Karai was revealed for Shredder's Revenge, they were like, "Wait a minute, you know," it was like that. She looks very familiar to the Karai that I came up with, and they were like, "It's just a coincidence." And whether that's true or not, I mean, it is what it is. I get it. Right? They're in the industry. Even if that wasn't true, which I'm assuming it is true, they can't admit to that. So it's fine.
Oh yeah.
But that was probably one of the craziest coincidences in quite a while, where I was like, so she has shadow clones, you say? Really? Cool. I did that too. that's cool that we thought the same idea. But
what an interesting
like,
coincidence.
yeah. So there's so many people behind the scenes that, I mean, obviously they're in the credits, that are been involved in this and are now doing real games, and therefore like a lot of their ideas, I kind of had to take a break to the back burner and stuff. But at the end of the day, I love fighting games and I love making them, even though like a part of me is like, is the fighting game market saturated? The other half of me is like, it will be when I'm done. So it's like, I kind of just want to keep doing things. I don't really know why, but it's like, it's an itch that I have where I'm like, what if we had a fighting game about this, where these characters were doing this and it was like that, and I just write it down. So I have like a folder full of design docs spanning back to like 2009 of just ideas that I have for characters to make work. Like, I decided, for example, like I love Rumblefish 2 as well. Like I got hooked on that the first time I went to MagFest, like about 8 years ago. A friend of mine introduced me to the game, and I love that game so much so that I was like, no one's really done anything with this character. I mean, with this gameplay on Mugen. There was like a guy who tried to make Beatrice a long time ago, but that's all I'm going to say about it. So I was like, I'm going to make this system perfect. There's only one problem. I'm not sure if this game is 3D or not. Turns out it's not. It's funny that it isn't, but it's like I got like a skeletal mesh thing going on. But I was like,
oh, interesting.
I'm going to put this gameplay on Mr. Karate. And no one understood why I did that. I'm not really sure why I did that. But you know what? It works. He's really cool. There's a video on my channel where I show how he works and how every aspect of Rumblefish 2 is applied to him, and it just kind of works. So I have these ideas. Heck, I've made 2 characters that I voice acted. And one of the characters, people were so sure that I did like some sort of editing to it. And I'm like, no, I just literally practiced how to do a second voice for a year before I coded him. Because I really wanted to try, even if it's as corny as it is, I wanted to try. I wanted to see if I could voice act the character. And I really liked the gameplay. I came up with those 2 too. And that was going to be in my anime game that is now kind of done. But like I said, I try to do some of everything. I've made music before. I haven't really got to make a song in almost 10 years now, so I can't really say I'm a musician. But I got into music. I've made RPGs before. Like, I just kind of do stuff. And I have fun. And just have a lot of crazy ideas. And no impulse control. So that's kind of where we are.
What, a one-man band? Is there anything that you can't do? This is it's wild to just keep that.
Can't draw.
Fair enough. Well, you found a lot of good friends to draw for you. It looks like. I said that was the last question. I lied. I do have one more for anyone watching. And like you've kind of described there's a lot of footsteps into the industry that have come through the fan scene. What's a way for someone to get in who wants to learn these things, who wants to dive in and hopefully find a way in the industry?
Considering that I'm not really in the industry, I don't really know. But you know what?
Let's say more. Yeah, they're like more getting into the fan, getting into the fan game. I wouldn't say industry so much, but just the community.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the Mugen community is where I got my start. We was a very quirky group of individuals, and I always tell people Mugen attracts the most interesting people, for better or worse. You know, there are so many stories that's the main reason why I interviewed people who came from when Mugen first started. Just to like, and if you listen to those, like there's like 7 episodes or so, you will hear stories of like the most crazy things that happen over a fighting game engine that also doesn't really do its job. So you kind of have to reverse engineer a lot of stuff. So it just kind of came down to willpower. Like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to make this happen. But today there are so many resources. There's a literal fighting game development Discord full of people who are like making indie games right now. Like, I believe the devs of Pocket Bravery in there, the devs of Murph is in there, and we just chop it up. Like, I remember when I got invited, and I was surprised at the amount of people who knew of me, because I was like, I thought, you know, for most of my life, and this is no exaggeration, because again, I've been doing this for 17 years, Mugen was a joke, a very funny joke, still is a joke for the most part. But there's now a small carving out of that engine where people were saying, yeah, but you know what? There are some serious games for it. If people who really know what they're doing, who have done the homework, and it plays amazing. Those amount of games can be counted on one hand. But you know what? Yeah. They're good. They're very good. You have the games that I've worked on. You got, of course, you can't have this conversation without mentioning Hyper Dragon Ball Z. All of those kind of things are by passionate people who are willing to do the work with the worst of resources. Like, we took the worst car imaginable and won the Indy 500 out of sheer determination and spite. So for people who want to do this, the only thing stopping you is you. Like, I didn't know, like, this engine is the reason why I do development as a career. I am a senior software engineer by trade. I have been a senior software engineer for 10 years now. I would not have even thought about programming if it was not for Mugen. Like, it drove my career. So it became a part of me. And I guess that's why I continue to do stuff with it, because I'm like, it's second nature to me. This is the air I breathe. If I'm not doing stuff at work, I'm doing stuff with Mugen, Ikemen-Go, those two, which Ikemen-Go is a fantastic replacement. That's why TMNT Cross Justice League Turbo is able to get away with all of the things it does to look more official, is because I can just kind of do whatever I want, and I'm not used to having that level of power. So that's kind of why I just do whatever. But the engines are out there. You don't even have to do Mugen or Ikemen. You know, you got people who make fighting games and Godot. There are people who make fighting games in Redacted Engine until that company gets their ish together. You have people who make fighting games and, of course, Unreal. So it just comes down to how badly do you want it. And it doesn't matter if you can't draw. There are people who are making games with characters that, like, for all intents and purposes, just look like doodles come to life. But guess what? It slaps. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's fun. And that's also been my design philosophy. Because in one of the other games that I worked on, the inspiration behind it was that the first version of Ikemen didn't work so good. So, like, a lot of stuff just didn't work on the character. So we found out later that you could tech a lot of these combos we were coming up with. But there you couldn't. So there was this guy who edited these Sango Fighter sprites, which is like the Sango Fighter 2 actually, which is of course a DOS game, named General Chicken. He's like dormant. I don't know where he is now, but he kind of just made sprites out of sheer force of will. He rotated them, he Franken-sprited them, he did whatever he needed to get the job done. And you know what? So do I. And I agree. If you want to make a new attack, rotate it 90 degrees. Uh-oh, now it's a brand new thing. Like, it's just crazy the ideas you can get away with. Even like, if you can't do art, you can be creative. And that's that's been my main design philosophy.
Guys, he develops, he voice acts, he's even a motivational speaker. Give it up for Kamekaze. Thank you so much for being on. Where can people find you and everything, literally everything you're working on?
So my YouTube channel is Claude75. That'll be in the description probably, because you can spell that 50 ways. I don't know why I have that name. It just kind of happened. Of course, there's my main website, Kamekaze.world. There's TMNT.xjl.com. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Twitter. I'm not calling it the other thing.
Never. It's a dumb fucking name.
Yeah. So I'm on Discord, obviously. I'm around, and it wasn't until recently that I even revealed what I looked like, because I enjoyed the anonymity of people having no idea what I look like, to the point where people, like, when I finally did show my face, they were like, "Did you get a body double or something? That's not you." And when they met me a combo breaker, they were like, "Holy crap, that is you." And I'm like, "Holy crap, it is me. Why are we holy crapping?" Like, so it's something I had to get used to. But I can be found there. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be on Twitter, because I really think that Blue Sky is the future. I really like the ideas that they're doing there. But yeah. Of course, obviously, there's the main Twitter account, TMNTTF on Twitter. The graphics guy, I believe he is AyWhatsGoingOn on Twitter. So we're around. Like, if you follow TMNT XJO hashtag, we're also on FGC Network, which is some other Twitter adjacent. So just follow the hashtag. Just Google it and see where it takes you. That's probably where we are. It's that we try to simplify it a bit.
That's the magic. Follow the hashtag. Get in on it. Like you said, if you want to check out the game, TMNTXJL.com. Download it. I highly suggest checking it out. I'm going to stream it later in the show after this. One more time, Kamekaze, thank you so much for being on the Kaiju Lounge. I really appreciate you hopping on with me. And everyone else, stick around. We will be right back.